Hello and welcome to September's Tech of the Month in association with Garmin. Now you might see we're not in our usual surroundings, and that is because excitingly we're moving to a new location. But for the time being, In Gear Cycles in Forest Row has very kindly put us up in part of their bike shop, so a massive thank you to them. Now, this month we have got SRAM's new Explore range of components, Ribble's brand new superbike, and most importantly, brand new Shimano Dura Ace. So I'm going to hand over to Simon straight away with all the headlines on the new group set.
5 years in the making, and after an intense period of speculation, spy shots and secret patents, Dura Ace is finally with us. And it's 12 speed, as we thought it was going to be. It's also semi-wireless, something else we thought it would be, but there's no mechanical version at all.
Let's go back a second. Semi-wireless, what does that mean?
Okay, so semi-wireless means that the shifters themselves are wireless. They have coin cell batteries in them, but the mechs themselves are wired to a central battery, which is in the seat post, like old Di2.
And there must be a brain in that system somewhere.
Yeah, it's actually in the rear mech. The rear mech does a lot of really clever stuff. It has 3 functions in one. So it's where the brain is, it's where the shifting transmits the signal to, so it receives the signal. It also contains the junction box, which means that you also plug the charging cable into the rear mech to charge it.
So you do still have to take it into the house in order to charge it? You don't have removable batteries like with SRAM?
No, you don't. The battery is stuck in the seat tube, so yeah, you've got to wheel it into the house.
So semi-wireless, what's the benefits of that system over what Shimano were already doing, where everything was wired, shifters included, to a central battery?
Yeah, well, you've got the cleaner cockpit with the wireless shifters, obviously, but you can still benefit from the bigger battery in the seat post, which means more power, hopefully a longer battery life, and more powerful, faster shifting, which the battery can cope with.
So one of the major things that Shimano talked about was faster shifting. How much faster is it, and do we really need faster shifting?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a bit faster, actually. They're saying 58% faster for the rear mech. It's going from the 17 to the 15, they've said, actually. And that's just under 1/10 of a second, they're quoting, down from just under 2/10. So it's really fast.
If you're counting.
Yeah. The front derailleur as well is faster, and that is down by 45%.
Wow.
So that's taking about 2/10 of a second to shift between chainrings. But actually, if you find the shifting too fast, you can always slow it down via E-tube still. So there's still the option to slow the speed of shifting down if you want to.
So moving on from shifting, I feel like we need to talk about the hydraulic system, because there's been a fairly major change here.
Yeah. So the pros didn't like the original Dura Ace rotors, and they swapped them for XTR quite often.
So the changes that they've made to those rotors, presumably that's learnings. If all the pros were using XTR rotors, presumably they've just taken the technology from their mountain biking side and built that more into the road system?
Well, they're quoting 66% less deformation of the rotors, so they could well have taken some of that technology.
So with it going Di2 only, has it ditched the rim brakes? Is it disc brake only?
It's not. Rim brakes are still there. You can hear Ineos and a lot of other people breathing a big sigh of relief.
Certainly can. So any changes to caliper size, reservoir sizing, anything like that?
Well, I mean, the sizes are probably going to be pretty much the same as before, because the 140 and the 160 is pretty normal for road bikes. But they've actually made the calipers a little bit lighter, and the rotors too, so the overall braking system is lighter.
And speaking of size around the shifters have actually increased in size very slightly, which will be really happy news for the riders that kind of felt like they were going to fall off the end on potholes and so on.
Yeah, exactly. Especially the raised ends of the hoods are a bit bigger, so that you can get your fist around it properly, and your fist is in line with your forearm when you're in the aero hoods position like that. They've also increased the length of the grip section of the hood, so that you can get more of your hand around it like that. They're saying for extra comfort and security. So for the braking, they're calling it a larger control area, which means that you've got a better lever sweep. And they're also putting the Di2 buttons in a slightly better position, so that they're a little bit more tactile. you can differentiate between them a bit better even with gloves on. And there's a bigger offset between the two buttons so that you can actually feel the difference a bit more easily. And the other thing they've done is actually brought the bottom paddle closer to the drop section of the handlebar so that you can reach them with your first finger a little bit more easily.
And what's going on with the gearing? Because we've got some bigger chain rings, which is completely counter to what we're seeing from some other group set brands.
Yeah, Shimano have actually dropped 53-39, the classic ratio, and now we've got 54-40. Well, I mean, when we were talking to Madison, Shimano's distributor, they told us really that they didn't make any secret of the fact that Dura Ace was developed for pros these days, and it's going to be mostly pro teams, pro riders who are riding it, and they're riding bigger gears these days. And it's not just because they have bigger legs and they're stronger, it's because they want that better chain line that you get with a bigger chainring.
So actually, I think it's really important to determine exactly what Shimano have done in terms of their cassettes, because we've seen all three big group set manufacturers kind of take this in a different way. SRAM just added a huge spread to their cassette by adding that 10 at the bottom and then going really large. Whereas Campag and Shimano have kind of done something quite similar, which is they've, kept the range relatively the same, but just made the gaps between gears much smaller.
Yeah, it starts with the 11 sprocket, there's no 10 sprocket, so it just means literally you've got 12 sprockets instead of 11, and so you've got more gears and you've got smaller jumps between the ratios, which means that you can keep your cadence more even when you're changing. But Shimano is now also offering an 11-34 cassette. So for the first time with Dura Ace, you've got a 1-to-1 ratio if you want it. If you're using the compact, the 50-34 ratios, and you're using that 11-34 cassette, then you've got 1-to-1, which is pretty incredible for Dura Ace. One of the things that is going to make a lot of people happy is that the new cassette, 12-speed cassette, fits on the old 11-speed free hub body, so you don't need a separate driver body like you do with SRAM. It's backwards compatible. Yeah, there is actually a new range of wheels, 12-speed wheels, but you can't use an 11-speed cassette on the new 12-speed free hub body, so it doesn't work that way round. But it means you can use your old wheels, your old 11-speed wheels, with the 12-speed group set.
Which brings me very conveniently onto the price of new Shimano Ultegra and Dura Ace. How does it compare?
It's pretty expensive. I did a little calculation adding up the components with the power meter chain set and got it to 4,333.
And that's for Dura Ace?
That's for Dura Ace.
What about Ultegra?
Ultegra, with the Ultegra power meter chain set, about £1,000 cheaper.
Mm-hmm. And one thing we haven't talked about very much yet is weight. So how does this group set compare to the old Dura Ace, and how does then Ultegra compare to that? Yeah,
maybe slightly surprisingly, the new Dura Ace group set is a little bit heavier than the old one. We're just talking 15 grams or so, but they're not really trying to make any claims for its weight. It seems like they're sticking at somewhere around 2.5 kilos for Dura Ace, which is what this new one is. For Ultegra, it's about 200 grams heavier, which is not very much at all. So it's up to the consumer really. Do you want to pay £1,000 less and for 200 grams more? And I think probably it's a bit of a no-brainer for most people, isn't it?
So not to be outdone, SRAM has also released a whole range of new components as well. Its Explore range. Now, Michelle, you have all the details.
Now, firstly, the name continues cycling's continued assault on vowels. I don't know where that's coming from, but yes, XPLR or Explore is SRAM's new gravel ecosystem. And it contains quite a few components. So firstly, there's a drivetrain, which has a 1044 cassette. That's something we saw coming through with Ribble, and they've got the longer cage rear mech, which was launched with Ribble, and now you can get the Force and Red versions as well. So that's one component of this ecosystem, and it means that you're less likely to see those mullet bikes around with the eagle on the back, because SRAM says this fits the hole that those people were trying to address. What I do think is potentially more interesting is what they've done with their brand RockShox. So they brought in both a RockShox Rudy suspension fork, which offers between 30 and 40 mil of travel at the front, and also a RockShox Reverb dropper post. Okay, so before we get ahead of ourselves, talk to me about this new fork. What exactly can it do and what are the spec details? So it's an air sprung fork and it uses a lot of the technology that you see on the SID cross-country mountain bike fork. It's got the same race day damper, and it's got 30mm stanchions, which is slightly different to the SID, which uses 32mm. It also offers a lot less travel. So it offers 30mm of travel, whereas on the SID you've got 100mm of travel. That's quite a significant difference. It's very much about, it's for gravel riders, so you're not expecting to come across the same sort of terrain. So it can be tuned by a shock pump, and then the rebound is adjusted by a 2.5mm Allen key. So it's not too difficult maintenance-wise, but it will need servicing, which is going to be something that's quite new to gravel riders and not something we've had to deal with in the past. And there are other systems out there that might offer very similar amounts of travel. So, I mean, with the Specialized Future Shock, you get 20mm, and there's also suspension stems out there, which will give you about 20mm of travel. The difference is that with those, your reach is actually adjusted as you ride, and that's been quite a turn off for an awful lot of riders. I mean, you do still get a geometry adjustment with a fork, but it's more with head angle. It's going to affect the handling, but it doesn't affect your actual position on the bike, which makes a difference. So running this fork is obviously going to have some impact on the geometry. Firstly, worth bearing in mind that it's only designed to be run with a 700C wheel. It's not designed for a 650B. And SRAM does point out that the majority of people riding 650B are doing so they can plump up the tyre so that they can give themselves some more comfort. Now, the fork has a 45mm offset. Reduced offset forks is something that the mountain bike world has seen quite a lot of. It allows you to shorten the wheelbase while still getting really good manoeuvrability and bringing the rider's weight over the front of the bike. So we are seeing more and more technology coming from the mountain bike side.
I suppose to play devil's advocate with that 700C wheel point, riders are putting wider tyres on 650B wheels to add comfort, but also because they're tackling burlier terrain and they want more aggressive tyres. And if you add suspension into the mix, you're only encouraging riders to ride more aggressive terrain. So I could see riders saying, well, I want to keep my 650B wheel setup with a really aggressive tyre, but I also want to add into the mix a telescopic mountain biking fork because I'm riding stuff that I have no right to be riding because these bikes are getting way more aggressive.
So another point obviously is the weight. So uncut, it weighs in at 1,300 grams. On my bike, it's obviously got a smaller head tube. So the one that's been cut down comes in at 1,225 grams. So the bike that's coming to me is a Salsa Warbird. So I did ask for the weight of the fork that came on that, which was 549 grams. So the difference you've got there is 679 grams. So you've added 30mm travel and you've gained 679 grams. Now, whether that is a justified weight penalty is going to come down to the consumer, really.
Shouldn't you just ride a mountain bike and be done with it?
It's a very, very valid question. And you've got to wonder, at what point are we going to go full circle? Because we call anything that is the more burly type of gravel riding, apparently now we're calling progressive gravel. At what point does progressive gravel progress to the point it's now hardtails, and then what do we then say, oh well, actually maybe I need something a bit more, maybe I need a full suspension mountain bike, and then are you reading our brother title MBR? I have to wonder. It's
a very philosophical question. I mean, I'll say it again, it's always going to come down to the type of riding that you do. When I was on group gravel rides up in Scotland, when we were riding in Aberfoyle, you didn't need a suspension mountain bike fork there, and the priority was going fast because there were wide forestry roads and you're riding along at like 30 kilometers an hour. Your priority is maintaining speed rather than riding anything techie or gnarly. But if you're riding techie or gnarly trails, then this might be something you want. But would you just go for a mountain bike? And
then you look at some of the major gravel races. I mean, those guys are going really, really quite fast, aren't they? And so you can imagine they probably would get spat on a hardtail. But then at what point do the gravel bikes become so progressive that they effectively are hardtails? Does that then improve hardtail technology? Remains to be seen. It is worth spending some time though actually comparing the SID fork and what RockShox have brought to gravel riders with the Rudy fork, because the weight difference is 70 grams, yet on the SID you have 100mm of travel. And to me, 100mm is at the point when something's becoming really useful. 30mm, I've said I don't want to knock it till I've tried it, and I haven't tried it yet. I will be trying it this weekend, but it'll be interesting to see. Does it really give you that much difference? We'll have to find out really. So it's not actually just the new Explore gearing and front suspension as well. There is also a RockShox Reverb dropper seat post, and that's something I'm quite excited to see, because quite often on the gravel bike, actually I would like to drop the seat post. So that offers between 50 and 75mm of travel. There are 350mm and 400mm versions available. And what's really quite cool is it also uses the Access battery. So if you have a full Access bike, you can swap the battery in your seat post onto your drivetrain should you run out of juice, which I think actually could really benefit riders on really long adventures, because you are going to use a bit less of the seat post, aren't you, I imagine. So the mechanism that you usually change your chain rings on SRAM Access is to press into both shifters, and now if you've got this drop a seat post, you'll use the same mechanism and that'll drop your seat post. So the seat post weighs between 567 and 595 grams. Now I did check a Zip service course aluminium seat post, and that comes in about 250 grams. So you are adding in the region of 350 grams to the weight of your bike. It's not huge. Of course, if you add the suspension on the front and also the dropper post, in total you've added around 1 kilo. But if that kilo makes your bike way more capable and that is what you're after, you might consider it worth it. If you're just going to go with plump tyres, then you'll probably continue to do so.
Talking of exploring, we are giving away this, a Garmin Edge Explore worth £219.99. Now it has a 3-inch display, up to 12 hours of battery life, and is able to navigate you both on and off-road, so it's the perfect accompaniment for your next adventure. To be in with a chance to win this computer, head down to the description below, click on the link and follow the information there. Now we'll announce the winner 3 weeks from when this video goes live, so good luck. So Bike of the Month this month is Ribble's brand new Ultra SLR, the new superbike from the brand. Now Michelle, you have the information on this one. What's new? What have we got?
So Ribble's brand new Ultra SLR. The brand is calling this the world's most aerodynamically optimized road bike, which is quite a claim, especially for a brand that only opened its home molds back in 2018. So if this claim is to be believed, they've come on in pretty huge leaps and bounds in a few short years. It is, as it sounds, an aero road bike. It's the bike that will be ridden by Drops Nicole and also by Ribble Weldtight. So Ribble have produced data on how much faster it is than their Endurance SLR. So they say it is 75.1 seconds faster over 40k at 22 miles an hour than the Endurance SLR, and it's around 65 seconds faster if you're riding at 29 miles an hour. And it is really interesting that they have produced data both at 22 and 29 miles an hour, because most riders are not riding at 30 miles an hour, which is something that people point out very often. Now, Ribble, as I said, have produced a huge amount of data alongside this bike, which is something we don't get to see all that often. And they've also done all their CFD and wind tunnel testing with a rider. So they use their head of product, Jamie Burrows, and they also use Joss Loudon of Drops Nicole, as well as a mannequin. Ribble made a really big deal of the fact that they had rider on testing. I think it is worth bearing in mind that they're not the only brand out there using rider first testing. So Trek, when they brought out their new Madone, they'd used a mannequin with 2 water bottles, and also with BMC's new Time Machine, they used track testing with a rider on, and then they averaged the difference across a range of different riders. So I think it is worth bearing in mind, yes, it is good that they did rider on testing. They are not unique in doing that.
So what is it exactly that makes this bike so fast?
I think what's most interesting to me is the handlebar. So Ribble has 3 patents in over this handlebar. So on the first one, Ribble has actually mounted the dual control shifters directly onto the handlebar, which means they're able to do away with the band clamp that is supplied by group set manufacturers. And asked about the structure, or how structurally sound this is, Ribble says, well, they've taken away something that creates tension on the handlebar. So they say shouldn't be a problem, potentially is better. I did ask Shimano, and obviously they had to go by the book and say, well, our components are designed to be ridden with our only with our components, so with that band clamp, which is worth bearing in mind. But going with that system, going with a direct mount, means that they could optimize the bottom of the drop. So at the moment, everyone using the band clamp, which is nearly everyone, is restricted and using a 23.5 millimeter drop. So it has to be round in shape. Yeah. And by going with direct mount, they've completely eradicated that. So they could go wild on the shape of the bar. So what's really interesting, if you look on the side profile, is you've got that kind of webbed profile. And that is both better to hold, feels absolutely awesome in your hand. I haven't ridden one on the road, but I have held it in an office in Bath, and it did feel really great. You don't need any bar tape.
I was going to say, yeah, right, don't you? Right.
No, and
so what makes it comfortable? Is it squidgy?
No, it's not squidgy, but there is some texture to it, so it has got a dimpled texture. And they haven't kind of come out with any claims about, the dimples creating texture and therefore being more aerodynamic, but it is more comfortable. And you also do get that kind of puppy paws position because you can extend your hands just that bit better on the bar. So in terms of width, they have absolutely gone narrow. I mean, what is the point in making an aerodynamic bike and then putting someone this wide on the front? And I totally on board with that. So the Pro model is 33 centimeters at the tops, and then there's also 36 and 38 if you want to go a bit wider, which I expect the majority of riders will, but it is flared, so you do get that bit more stability on the drops when you're really, the tops are nice and aerodynamic and narrow. So there is more to the handlebar in that you've got these aero wake generators, which are the kind of twin peaks that you see on the front of the handlebar. So kind of straight out of the book of the Hope Lotus track bike, they've created something that disrupts airflow in front of the rider's knee, which is these aero wake generators. And then when they tested that, they did find that it was indeed significantly faster than the option without that.
So it's a bit like you're drafting the handlebar.
You are, yeah, your knee is drafting the handlebar. My immediate question was, but don't some riders ride with their knees out? Some riders ride with their knees in. They have tested this with 3 different riders, one of them admittedly being a mannequin, therefore not human, but they did find consistent performance benefits there. Of course, the frame itself is also heavily optimized. So Ribble did an awful lot of work on the top of the down tube, bottom of the down tube, and also the head tube. And again, they provided data for all of those decisions and compared it. What I do find quite interesting, and Simon and I have talked about this in quite a lot of detail, is the yaw angles that Ribble chose to test over. What's really interesting is that Ribble tested from 0 to 20. And there were quite a few instances where they found that something was faster 0 to 10. As soon as they got to 10, it became slower. So they actually opted for the option that was fastest between 0 and 15. If you look at what other brands have done, when Trek released the Trek Madone, they tested between -12 and +12. And when we asked an independent aerodynamicist, he said he would expect the majority of instances, actually 90% of data points he expected would come between -12 and 12. So the question has to come, well, why has Ribble made decisions that are based on 10 to 15? Maybe we're riding in really windy conditions.
Yeah, I mean, is it because the tubes are very wide, aren't they? And so is it that it gets better results at higher degrees of yaw?
If I put my cynical hat on, you might suggest that is why they've done it at those higher degrees of yaw.
It could be said so, yeah, absolutely. It is good that they have provided all that data. They've not hidden anything. It's very, very transparent. Actually, one thing we did notice is there weren't any negative yaw angles. So the left-hand side of the bike is kind of not considered in the data that we have seen. However, directly asked, Ribble said they did look at negative yaw angles, both at CFD and wind tunnel. So we have to just take their word on that.
Could it be that the positive degrees of yaw, so coming from the right-hand side of the bike, they could have been better than the...
Gosh, so cynical today, Simon, aren't you? Another good point.
So we've got to ask the questions as journalists.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So yeah, we've asked that question. They say yes, they've got that data. They haven't given it to us. Why they haven't given it to us, I think we're going to have to use our imagination there. We haven't got it in front of us. But a bicycle, certainly, especially a disc brake bicycle, is an asymmetric creature, and therefore there are going to be data differences. But Ribble has taken some steps towards compliance. So they've got a tyre width that goes up to 32 mil. Admittedly, a lot of compliance does just come down to what you put on the wheels. And they've also got these drop seat stays, and there is a bit of a kink there as well. And also you have carbon front end, so that's going to aid a bit of vibration dampening as well. So there are all those things, but they are very chunky tubes, so there is a bit of a question there.
Have they given us a weight?
Yes, so the medium starts from 7.6 kg.
So I'm imagining the Ribble is going to be pretty expensive.
The bikes actually start from £3,899. That's the SL model, so it doesn't have the Ultra handlebar, but it does have the Ultra frame, comes with Shimano 105. And then the SLR version comes in at £7,299, but that's with Dura Ace, NV wheels, and you also obviously get the Ultra handlebar. So compared to the likes of Specialized and Trek, it's not cheap, obviously, but it is significantly cheaper than the aero bikes you're getting from the mainstream brands.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. What an absolute bumper crop of massive products to talk about this month. Really hope you've enjoyed getting into the nitty-gritty details of those 3 very cool new releases. If you have, let us know in the comment section below what you think about all of those. I'm expecting there's going to be a lot said about gravel forks. I'm looking forward to reading that. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up and also to subscribe to the Cycling Weekly YouTube channel. Now we'll be back soon with some more great tech content, and we'll see you then. It's Explore range, no vowels. Explore. 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 Okay.
You can just do that the whole way through.
Explore. Explore. Sounds French, that, doesn't it? SRAM XPLR.